This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, is Evan Jansen. The show is always live and it's broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. We are also streaming live on YouTube right now with our entire show available on demand all day on our YouTube channel. We've got a packed show for you, by the way. Danny Jordan will be sworn in as the mayor of the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro shortly. We'll also get an update on the Panayotto case from Port Elizabeth. It's causing quite a stir there. Should we keep the lights on in gang-infested areas? Will it help? What do you think? At SABC Newsroom, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Also, the Black Sash celebrates 60 years of activism this week. They've got celebrations over the weekend, and we'll look at that. We'll also close the show with a look at EFC 40 and also chat to award-winning footballer Teko Modisi, if we can get Teko to hang around. But first, let's get the day's news from Newsroom.
Good morning, I'm Anine Dormal. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. SAFA President Danny Jordan will be sworn in as an ANC proportional representative councillor in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro this morning. The move paves the way for him to be elected executive mayor of the Metro in a vote later today. Jordan, who will stay on as the president of the Football Association, says he's looking forward to the challenge.
It was just wonderful to meet all the councillors, to talk to them, and looking forward to the challenge and the work that we have to do. Huge optimism, huge expectation, and we will have to work together and work hard.
The Communication Workers Union and MTN will meet today for wage negotiations. This week, MTN and the workers affiliated to the union besieged the company's headquarters in Johannesburg. The union is demanding a 10% salary increase. They are also demanding a 16% bonus payment twice a year, along with the permanent employment of casual workers. In Cape Town's Grassy Park, police have arrested at least 15 people this morning. Police started with Operation Fiela in the area at 4 a.m. The operation formed part of government's recently launched plan to clamp down on criminal activity. The operation is expected to continue until noon. The search is still on for 6 of the 7 prisoners who escaped from the Groenpunt maximum prison in Denaysville in the Free State early yesterday. Among the escapees is a serial rapist serving a sentence of over 200 years. The prisoners escaped by breaking through an unbarred toilet window with a steel dustbin. And humanitarian agencies are struggling to cope with an influx of refugees fleeing the political instability in Burundi. The UN has confirmed at least 27 cholera-related deaths on the shores of Lake Tanganyika across the border in Tanzania.
Refugees are in an isolated village in a shore that is not accessible by land, literally, and the only way to access it is by ship. It makes it a very desperate situation.
Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Janine. In a few hours' time, SAFA President Danny Jordan will be sworn in as an ANC proportional representative councillor in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. This paves the way for him to be elected executive mayor of the Metro in a vote later today, becoming the Metro's 4th mayor in 6 years.
Taking time and getting to know his mayoral committee and the ANC councillors, Danny Jordan is adamant he will bring about change to the troubled Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. He was chosen as the mayoral candidate following an ANC National Working Committee's visit to the region last week.
Tremendous excitement, a lot of hope, and it was just wonderful to meet all the councillors, to talk to them, and looking forward to the challenge and the work that we have to do. Huge optimism, huge expectation, and we will have to work together and work hard.
Danny Jordan, his deputy Bix Ndoni and Chief Whip Lito Suga will be sworn in as councillors. A council meeting that seeks to appoint the 3 into office officially will take place at the end of this month. Abongile Dumago, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
Been a lot going on in Port Elizabeth. Our reporter Janine Lee, well, she's in studio in the Friendly City to tell us about the new broom, Danny Jordan, and also give us an update on the court case involving Christopher Panayotu. Very good morning to you, Janine. Let me just get my papers. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, as you said, Evan, it's been a pretty busy week in Port Elizabeth this week.
The winds of change are blowing in the Friendly City. Give us the latest on Danny Jordan, the expectation, and then maybe a little bit of the pomp and ceremony, if there is such a thing that will follow in the next 12 hours.
Indeed, and you know how the wind can blow in Port Elizabeth, but let's hope that this is a good wind. Our team is currently at City Hall now for the council meeting where Danny Jordan and his deputy and the new chief whip are going to be sworn in today as councillors. Now, Danny Jordan has met some of the council members. He had a really nice time. He said he got a really warm welcome. So today he will officially be sworn in as a councillor, and then next week we expect a special council meeting where they will elect him officially to the position of mayor. So I think it's the niceties today and possibly for this week, but from next week when he officially becomes mayor of the Bay of Port Elizabeth, I think the hard work really begins. There are a number of outstanding things that he needs to address. But, you know, Danny Jordan, he's a man of few words. I've known him for many years. And one thing he has said is that you can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So I think we can watch this space closely, Urban. I think he's a man on a mission, and there are going to be some positive changes.
Some call it a shrewd move to appoint him as the mayor of a troubled municipality, if one is honest and frank. What do you think Danny Jordan will bring to the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro?
Well, we all know that Danny doesn't like to fail, so that's a good positive. The ANC Secretary-General, Gwedi Mantashe, said that Danny was appointed not because of the local government elections next year. It was because of the service delivery problems in the metro. So there are two stories up for grab. Is it about the elections or is it about service delivery? But service delivery cannot be ignored. And I think some of the things that he's going to look to tackle straight away is going to be the public transport system in the Bay. You'll remember way back for 2010, we bought all those buses, hundreds of them standing idle. Absolutely no public transport here in Nelson Mandela Bay. Also, that forensic investigation, the Kabuso report, nothing was done with that. So I think that's going to be high on his agenda, as is going to be the major issues that are facing many of the informal settlements here in Nelson Mandela Bay. That's housing, sanitation, and electricity. So he's going to have his hands full. But those are some of the priorities. But he's a man of few words. I think he's going to put his foot to the metal and get on with it. And there's probably from Danny going to be less talk and more action.
Yeah, he's also PE's favourite son, and he'll have a lot of support there. But let's move on to PE's favourite story at the moment, and that's the very gruesome case, really, of Christopher Panayotu, who's alleged to be the mastermind behind his wife's involvement. It really gripped the city this week, didn't it?
Indeed, Urban, and you know, it might be off the court roll for today, but it's something that's on everybody's minds. We'll be back in court on Tuesday next week for heads of arguments from the state and the defence. The bail application wrapped up yesterday, but just to give our viewers a backtrack of what happened, it was the first time we heard from an affidavit from the investigating officer exactly what happened to Jade Panayotu. And we heard that way back in September last year, the hit on her life was allegedly put out. And there were two botched attempts. One was that apparently Christopher Panayotu wanted his wife to come to one of his clubs for lunch on the weekend. And the plan was that on her way home that she would be forced off the road and the hit would take place then and it would be made to look like a robbery. But she said she didn't want to go to lunch at his club. So that was cancelled. And then there was another time when it was raining extremely heavily in Port Elizabeth and the hit was for that day. So it was called off on that day. And some interesting facts that came out yesterday was in the investigating officer's report, he said that on the morning that she was abducted, she was hit over the head, she was put into the boot of the car, taken to KwaNobuhle, where she was shot twice in the back and once in the head. And that's the first time that the official version from the investigating officer has come out. But very sad, we've heard how Christopher Panayoti's father actually called Jade his daughter, and he had said to his son, listen, you need to stop your affair, because if you don't stop your affair with your mistress, I'm going to disinherit you. And that's how fond he was of his daughter-in-law. And it's extremely traumatic and sad for his parents to be in court and watch all these things, Eben, being read out about their son and how he is alleged to have masterminded this entire hit. But also, just briefly, let me touch on how the state countered the argument as why he should not get bail. He said the state found that apparently he is in possession or has applied for a Cyprian passport, and he also has a Cyprian ID document. So they say he is a big flight risk. And what they're looking at the moment, there's what they call touch DNA, and they're looking to get touch DNA off some of the money that was paid to the hitman. Those results will probably be available in about 3 weeks' time. So should Christopher Panayoti's DNA be on that money, that will indeed be extremely incriminating. But closing heads of argument will take place next Tuesday in the PE Magistrates Court. So we'll be watching that one closely. And as I said, I think I alluded to it earlier in the week when I spoke to you, Eben, no matter where you go in Port Elizabeth, it was the same with the Riva Steenkamp and Oscar Pistorius thing. Everybody is talking about this case.
Just tell us about the mood there. You know, you mentioned the Riva factor and so forth. Port Elizabeth, this has really hit home to people in PE, and the mood was quite a mood outside of the court the whole week.
Absolutely. We had people who were protesting outside of court. There were people in court. They had, on their clothing, they had a yellow J on, they'd cut out in material and posted a yellow jade on their clothing. And all over social media, it's let's get justice for Jade. And I mean, even just in the last few years, I mean, 3 horrific murders in Port Elizabeth. There's the Jade one, which is currently underway. We had Riva Steenkamp, and then we also had a lady called Debbie Lewis, and she was murdered by her husband, who slit her throat and tried to pass it off as intruders that had done it, and no justice for that family, or no closure, because her husband, he hung himself a year later. And this is all in the space of a few years. So the abuse of women, particularly in Port Elizabeth and all over the country, and we must also bear in mind for perhaps the cases, the women that aren't as high profile as this, that maybe don't make social media or the radio or the television stations, but it's going on every day. 47 women are murdered in our country on an ongoing basis, almost daily.
Well, Janine, thank you for joining us. It's an emotive story and something very close to the heart of all South Africans, the Panayiotou case that's going on in Port Elizabeth at the moment. Thank you very much to Janine Lee, always gives us wonderful updates there from the Friendly City. Now, plans are underway as we move on to exempt streetlights in Cape Town's gang-ridden areas from being affected by load shedding. Mayoral Committee member for Safety and Security, Jean-Pierre Smith, says areas affected will be Manenberg, Ottery and Hanover Park. At least 20 people have been arrested during police and army raids at Manenberg on the Cape Flats this morning. Police say 3 illegal firearms have also been confiscated, and drugs, Mandrax, Tik and Dacha, were also seized during the raid. The raids, which began yesterday, will continue for most of today. In the latest raid in Grassy Park, police arrested at least 15 people in Operation Fila that started at 4 a.m. this morning. Now, the City of Cape Town's Mayoral Committee for Safety and Security, Jean-Pierre Smith, joins us in our Cape Town studio to talk about the raid and then the latest crime prevention strategies in the city. A very good morning to you, Mr. Smith. Thank you once again for joining us.
Morning.
Just give us a quick update on the kind of raids that have been going on there since very early this morning. What is the overall view?
Look, I can speak only really for Metro Police. Our gang and drug task team does its work every day. We've had the privilege over the last few weeks to have the National Project Operation Fiela working around the city in Bellville and Retreat. Yesterday in Manenberg, and from about 3 a.m. this morning in Retreat, in Ottery, and I was present there for the one early this morning, and coordinate search operations, which are quite labour intensive. So they've roped in the assistance of the military and effectively search every single property in all the flats or within the targeted areas for firearms, drugs, wanted persons, etc. So very welcome operations. We'd like to see more of them. And of course, they need to be backed up by small, intelligence-driven, prosecutorially orientated work by specialized units, something the city is doing and that we see SAPS moving towards with Operation Combat and National Minister Nhleko's commitment to the reinstatement of specialized units.
And all of this in response to an upsurge in gang violence and activity.
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, I think the lives of people in Hanover Park and Ottery, to a lesser extent, and very significantly in Manenberg, have been made unlivable. An absolutely untenable situation with Manenberg lighting up for the last 6-7 months, continuously with intense gang violence all the time, to the point that the police occasionally have to withdraw. And a job that is already very difficult and made worse by the intermittent load shedding at night, which is what we're talking about now. Yeah. And over the last weekend, when it was particularly bad, the city's gang unit contacted me and said, look, this is just a completely untenable situation. We have to approach electricity and we have to find a way out of this.
Talking about that, exactly the concept that got all the press this week is the fact that you're going to leave the lights on in these areas during even load shedding periods. Just tell us the thinking and then the execution of this plan.
All right. Well, essentially, I approached the electricity department, who I must thank. They were exceedingly willing to listen and help find a solution for one of several solutions. The first being to leave the streetlights out, leave the streetlights on in a couple of targeted areas where we are experiencing really, really bad levels of violence. I'm not talking about the odd and intermittent crime. I'm talking about gang violence that rages on for hours on end and leaves residents hostage in their home. And secondly, to limit these areas to only daytime load shedding, or thirdly, to have the mechanism when the violence does arise for streetlights to be switched back on. I understand that load shedding imposed by Eskom imposes electricity-saving targets on all of us, and we have to meet those. But the streetlights contribute comparatively little to the consumption. And under those circumstances, when officers' lives are at risk, and I know these officers, I have met their families in some cases, these are not people who I am willing to lose. And if it takes a little bit of extra electricity to make them safer, then this must be done. It's not a game we can play. So the electricity is a minor thing. Let's make sure our staff are safe. And when you are expecting your staff to put themselves in harm's way between warring gangsters and the community, then they need all the help they can get. So for the sake of SAPS and the Metro Police members, it looks like we'll be able to get those lights back on and get the switching differentiated at the substation level to ensure that we at least keep the streetlights on.
What needs to happen longer term, though, for us to deal decisively with the issue of gang violence on the Cape Flats especially? We seem to face this problem almost every year.
Well, I don't think we've ever stopped facing it since before the inception of our democracy and since. It's a pernicious problem. South Africa is not the only country that is crippled by this phenomenon. And Cape Town, unfortunately, historically has a worse dose of it than anywhere else in South Africa. It's something that I'm afraid is only going to be addressed when the criminal justice system gets a handle on the process. We have a conviction rate for gang-related violence at the moment that hovers around the 2% mark. It is an utterly untenable situation. No part of that criminal justice system is in the control of the city or the provincial government. It's all national government territory. The investigative competency of SAPS, which only they can do. Metro Police does not have that competency. The DOJ, the NPA, and then the Department of Correctional Services. So we have engaged with these entities through the provincial government and through the Department of Community Safety to try and talk about oversight mechanisms. Province is doing watching briefs on these cases so we can see where the institutional meltdown is that prevents bad people like this from being taken out of circulation. so that we don't just recycle our gangsters over and over and see the same bad people on our streets, which is an absolutely untenable situation for the community. We had a bad guy in Hanover Park, leader of the mongrels there, who we arrested only the other day on public violence and murder. But he was arrested by Metro Police. Last week we had to arrest him again with some 31,000 rands worth of drugs in his possession. It just can't work like this. We need a situation where the criminal justice system puts these people away and they stay away, and they are not able to get their hands on cell phones and run their gangs from their cells.
Thank you for joining us today. Mayoral Committee Member for Safety and Security in Cape Town, Jean-Pierre Smith, joining us, talking about, well, the continuing issues of gang violence that affect the communities, and really people can't even live normal lives there. But let's have a look at some of your comments on this exact issue. The Jesus says, what's Operation Fiela? Why sweep human beings? What are its aims? What are its effects? Well, we've just spoke about that at length. People's lives are affected. They can't live normal lives. They have to lock themselves up in their homes for hours and hours on end. Selakanya says, people in Cape asked government for military intervention to deal with gang wars, but now they are complaining. What do they want is the question from Selakanya. Teriyaki Joe says, say no to xenophobia, question mark. Where's the say no to Cape Flats gang violence campaign? We are human beings too, you know. That one from Teriyaki Joe. Outside Liberalism says, Durban is now becoming like Cape Town. Gang violence is so unbecoming, says Outside Liberalism. It is a scourge that, well, it seems many of our communities are facing. It's something that we all have to get ourselves involved with to deal with. The picture of the day today, well, it comes from the UN Refugee Agency, and it's captioned, I have a dream, which is to go somewhere far from Burundi to allow my children to study. Yes, terrific story, terrific picture. I like that. Let's take a look now at the front pages from around the world. We start in Europe. The Times reports that David Cameron will embark on a whirlwind tour of Europe to lay out Britain's terms for staying in the EU and seek backing from leaders for his reforms. Then we move to Australia. The Australian reports there that the federal government will put control of the troubled air warfare destroyer project out to tender, following a new report revealing the total cost for the 3 new ships has now blown out to around $9 billion US dollars rather. And finally, in Israel, the Jerusalem Post reports that US President Barack Obama said this week political forces in Washington seek to provide the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with a rubber stamp for its policies. Let's take a look at what's happening around our country today. In Port Elizabeth, of course, the bail outcome of Christopher Panayiotou is charged with masterminding the murder of his wife Jade will be heard. Then in Nelspruit, TVET college students in Mbombela will hold a candlelight ceremony to remember all those who have died of HIV and AIDS. This event is to highlight the challenges people living with the disease are still facing. And then in Pretoria, the DA will embark on a march to the Union buildings in protest about alleged illegal land sales by the city of Tshwane, as well as the lack of infrastructure development in the area there. Now, preparations for the official funeral of struggle stalwart and international icon Dr. Ruth Sehomotsi Mompati are at an advanced stage. The party, who passed away last week, will be buried tomorrow at Vryburg in the northwest. The funeral planning committee, led by chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Thandi Modise, says it is satisfied that all preparations are now in place.
This was one way of struggle, that apartheid will not put us down. It will not make us really look like we are oppressed. We are going to defy it, because I wanted them to see that I am as good as any one of them. And that's how our women did. We were women of determination, women of intent, women prepared to go to any lengths so that we can win our own freedom. We owed it to ourselves to look nice, to look the best, and be proud that we are here. Not because the men say so, or not because somebody's done us a favor, but because we were there when it was fought for, and we were part of the fight for freedom.
For the farmer, fire sometimes epitomizes a new beginning, purifying and cleansing the ravages of winter. With the help of the Children of Fire, Mita is now a social worker manager and helping other survivors to unleash their potential.
People should just allow people who are disabled or disfigured or whatever to be who they are.
Now happy and a bit more confident, Ntabi Singh helps around at the Children of Fire with chores.
People must come with a full heart to give, not to do the selfie, "Ah, shame, here's me and a burn kit."
Join me, Rifio Wemwiba, on Bopelong every Saturday at 17:30.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom. The African Union has come under fire from a senior leader in the Pan-African Parliament for failing to take action against Burundi's President Pierre Nkurunziza. Burundi dominated the debate on peace and security on the continent at the Parliament. Chairperson of the PAP's Committee on Cooperation, International Relations and Conflict Resolution, Saleh Kebzabo, says the AU showed double standards by condemning the attempted coup that was wanted by many Burundians, but failed to act against a defiant Nkurunziza. Speaking through an interpreter, Kebzabo came out in support of the coup plotters. Now, the chairperson of the African Union, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, is addressing the Pan-African Parliament right now. Let's go there.
That has to win now. Whereas the youth of today, as I say, stand at this crossroads. As the older generation, we do have the responsibility to create an enabling environment so that today's young generation of young people is, as we know, the young people are the largest number in all our countries in this continent. So Africa is the youngest continent because more than 60%, 65% of African population is under 35. So they are young. This is the greatest asset we have as Africans. But of course, you have to invest in that asset. And what investments do we need to put for the youth, for them to be able to play the role I just mentioned earlier? We have to ensure that, of course, they have food, that they have health, sanitation, but more importantly, that they have the necessary education, the skills, and of course we have to ensure that we also focus a lot more on science, technology, maths, engineering, because indeed, if we made that investment in the young people, we will be able to channel their energy, their enthusiasm, their creativity, their vitality into innovation, into driving Agenda 2063. And of course, when you talk about youth, we are talking about young men and women. Madam President of the PYA, I understand your top executive has 1 woman, yourself, and 11 men. I don't think that's the type of youth organizations we need on this continent. The majority of people, and of those young people, the majority are young women. You have one woman out of 12, it's a travesty. But I hope that you will do a lot of work to promote both young men and women so that at the next conference we can see a change. But I hope you also have the power of co-option, because we can't wait for another conference to add a second woman to your executive. So I hope your constitution allows. Of course, the youth of today should not have to wait for someone somewhere to bring development to them, as I said. We create the enabling environment, we give you the skills, and you run the race. A recent blog penned by one Kayode Aladen from Nigeria, titled, "Fellow Africans, the West owes you nothing." That blog is very interesting, by a young man. Well, I'm not sure actually, but a young person. And it goes like this, I'll just quote. "I give you this. You are tough, smart, and resilient. And you have a survival instinct not seen in any other. No continent has the potential you have. No people of any other continent has been endowed like you. You have it all. Land and climate, natural resources, and a young population. But you slumber on as though you know not its value. Then you complain when others see the value and take advantage." I think that young man has summarized everything about our continent. Now when he says we slumber, he's right. We slumber, and we complain when other people take advantage. So I think he's saying we must wake up from our slumber. And that's what we have to do. It was the similar sentiments that motivated us to reach out to all spheres, sectors, and levels of society with one simple but very complex question. What Africa do you want? And it was that question that produced the first draft of Agenda 2063, when the Africans in their various formations said what Africa they want. The compendium of aspirations of Africans here and in the diaspora gave birth to Africa's Agenda 2063. We are now seized with the task of finalizing and continually improving the first 10-year plan, implementation plan, which we will present to the June summit here in Sandton. This dialogue offers an important space for young people to engage, discuss, and influence that agenda, since it will be touching on their lives, their communities, and their countries, and their continent. Since we have declared 2015 as the year of women's empowerment and development towards Africa's Agenda 2063, I hope in your engagements during these couple of days, you will pay special attention to the aspirations of young women and girls. That does not take away from the aspirations of young men. I'm just saying special attention, because the young women tend to be invisible. And that's why we don't have them even in the PYA. So we must pay special attention. The young must lead the way and present the now and the future in this regard, as well as by being examples of non-sexism in their organizations and challenge patriarchy wherever it rears its head. Honorable members and honorable youth, as our blogger said, we are a continent endowed with many advantages and resources. Of course, I've mentioned the first and the most precious resource, which is our people. The second resource, well, maybe whilst we're on that resource, I think it's important, and I hope you will discuss this, that we must move faster towards harmonization of our vocational and higher education curricula and qualifications, because this will open the way for free movement of people, of course, free movement of goods as well. Because it means you can study anywhere, work anywhere where your skills are needed, without people asking you, oh, what qualifications do you have? Oh, we don't recognize this or that. So that harmonization is very important. There is work going on that, but it's not sufficiently taken as urgently as it should, and I hope you will agitate and make sure that that harmonization happens. And of course, our development must, of necessity, include infrastructure that connects and powers the continent. Your generation, in your lifetime, must be able to, if you are in Johannesburg, to go back home to Senegal, to Maputo, to Dar, to Nairobi, to Bangui, to Kinshasa, to Nouakchott, to Addis, and to every other capital, if you so choose, by high-speed rail. That you should try and achieve in your lifetime, in your generation. We must also ensure that we connect through broadband, ICT, highways, and aviation. Flying is still difficult, better than it was when I was young, but we need to keep improving it. But there is a limit to how many flights we can put on the sky. Therefore, we must make sure that our highways are good for us to drive and connect. Our rail is good enough for us to go on the trains and connect. But we should also ensure that our future is secure for future generations by tackling climate change, developing and innovating around renewable energies. Africa's oceanic space is 3 times our landmass. Do we know how big our landmass is? Do we know? Let me see, the young people. Do you know? You don't? Let me tell you how big Africa is. In Africa, you can accommodate China, you can accommodate the United States of America, you can accommodate Western Europe, and there'll still be space for Japan and other countries. But of course, the oceanic spaces are more than 3 times that. But these oceanic spaces have a lot of resources. Who is exploiting those resources in our oceanic spaces? Is it us for our benefit? I would say no. Most of the exploitation of those resources is by others who have seen the value of what that blogger talked about. So it is important that we develop our blue economy, including maritime transport. We import a lot, we export a lot. But whose transport do we use when we export or import? We use other people's transport. Who works on those in that transport? It's other people. The insurance, the whole value chain linked to that. We are not benefiting. So we need to change. Because there are many jobs associated with taking freight across the maritime highways to other continents or bringing freight to our continent. So it is in this vein, and it is a travesty that Africa, who has amongst the largest portion of unused arable land, spends billions on importing food. But of course, agriculture on the continent has been relegated to older people. Young people, how many are in agriculture? Almost none. The average age of people who work on the land today in Africa is about 50. So it's a dying trade. So it means if we don't change, we'll be importing even more food than we are today. So we need to attract young people, both into agriculture and agribusiness. But of course, we cannot attract them unless we modernize agriculture. Because I can't imagine you, cool as you are, holding a handhold hoe going like this. Can you imagine yourselves? No. So the women, during our consultations, one of the things they said to us, we must retire the handheld hoe to the Agricultural Museum. They don't want it anymore. And they want to be provided with access to modern technology. So I think we must modernize. And we must not reinvent the wheel. There are other countries that have modernized agriculture. They've used newer technologies. When you talk, people say, oh, tractors are not affordable and they can't be used everywhere. True. But there are tillers of all sizes that can be used. But that will also free the women, because a field that they will plow with a handheld hoe for 3 weeks, they can do that with a tiller in 1 day. So, and the roots can go deeper, because that handheld hoe can't go much deep in the soil. So we are launching that campaign in June. And it is in our 10-year plan that in this decade, between now and 2025, we must indeed modernize agriculture. But also we must give access to land rights, financial and extension services, irrigation, but we must also use agriculture to industrialize and agribusiness. Africa must industrialize by adding value to our natural resources, beneficiating our mineral resources. Of course, to do this, we need engineers, we need vocational training, and we need other skills that I spoke about earlier. But why is it so critical that we industrialize? You see, now we export more raw material and we import finished goods from other people. When you export raw material, you export jobs as well, because that raw material value is added, beneficiation is done with higher level jobs, and so those jobs are created in the countries where we are exporting our raw materials, not in Africa. Secondly, you export revenue, because what you export as raw materials and what you get from it, and when you import the finished goods, the price is very different. So we are the biggest exporters of jobs and revenue. But on the other side of the equation, we have lots of people unemployed. We are a very rich continent with poor people. And our riches are going out to deal with poverty in other countries. And poverty remains in Africa. So industrialization is not just a nice thing to have. It has to be done. It has to be done if we are, in the medium to long term, going to stop the tragedy that we see every year of our young people, women, children, dying in the Sahel, dying in the Mediterranean. Somebody said to me in a conversation, oh, it's because Africa doesn't have energy. They are following the lights in Europe. And I said to them, yes, they may be following lights in Europe, but in reality, they are following the jobs that we export with our raw materials. And so we have to stop that. And who best can stop it? It's you, young people. One, you have to be skilled. You have to ensure that the policies in our governments are that for industrialization. Because if not, this continent will just sink deeper. If you look at the countries that are amongst the fastest developing, some of them are doing very interesting things. I just want to quote one, which is my country, Ethiopia, where I live. You thought I was going to say South Africa? No, I live in Ethiopia. One of the things that Ethiopia has done, maybe over the past 25 years, I'm not sure, they started with about 2 or so universities. Now they have 33. In addition, they have lots of technical training places. But what do they do in these 33 universities? 70% of their intake is in science. And 40% of that 70% is in engineering. Because for industrialization, you need those skills. And you watch it. You watch that country. 20 years, watch it. Because they are doing the right thing. Other disciplines need to be trained, but to develop your economy and to industrialize, you need a lot of engineers, a lot of technologists to innovate. So if all of us can follow that route and have more institutions, but also focus a lot more on science and engineering, technology. But we are also advocating that we must also have online universities, because it's not possible to massify the number of physical institutions. If we wait for that, it will take us forever. But if we also take advantage of technology, we can quicker have our skills revolution. So we are looking at that as well. So we hope that you will support. It's not to undermine the physical institutions, but the physical institution must also have virtual space where those who cannot get into the physical can still study virtually. Let me also say that we need to silence the guns on our continent. It's not a must that there should always be a country that is where guns are blazing. But of course, the majority of countries, the guns are silent. And we must make sure that Agenda 2063 is implemented. Because if we don't implement it in those countries where the guns are silent, tomorrow, when people are hungry, there are no jobs, the guns will start, or instability will start. But silencing the guns means the youth must refuse to shoot at another fellow citizen. They must refuse to kill fellow citizens for no good reason, and there is no good reason to kill a fellow citizen. Traditionally, guns were meant for hunting food so that people can eat. But now, of course, they are used to kill people. But on the African continent, let's silence the guns. And young people will play a very critical role in doing that. But you can't do that if you say, oh, I'm too smart to be in politics. You have to get into politics. I'm a medical doctor, but I've always been in politics. Because that's where lives of people are shaped. That's where futures are shaped. And it's not mutually exclusive that if you are a professional, you can't be in politics. You should be, actually. And sometimes young people these days, they don't even register to vote. They don't even exercise. It's not just a right, it's also a responsibility to vote. And you don't exercise that right and that responsibility. And it's not acceptable. You should be part of political parties, you should be part of civil society, you should be part of everything that happens in your country. But in politics, policies are developed. In parliaments, as you know, in the executive, implementation. So you don't have to be all in parliament, but you have to be active members. Whether you work in the bank as a CA or whatever, you can still be an active person. Because you need to be agents for change. If you don't participate, how are you going to get change? So, if you continue to slumber, as the blogger said, you have yourselves to blame. But I also want to say, as part of re-energizing the Pan-African movement and ideals, we're also encouraging young people in schools, in communities, in higher education institutions to form AU clubs. to learn and influence your continental organization and learn about each other. Yesterday, I was very excited. I was in Cape Town at UCT, and they formed an AU club there. Because when you have formed the AU club, you look at all the decisions that our governments have taken, and you can say, this they've implemented, this they've not implemented. Then we engage them. We engage the Putimalamelas there and say, why have you not, you took this decision, why has it not been implemented? Because the decisions we take are very good, but implementation is a problem. Let me give you one example. In 2000, there was an agreement on Yamoussoukro Agreement, which is an aviation agreement, how we are going to work and cooperate amongst each other, have open skies, and grow our aviation industry. This was 2000. And it was supposed to start implementation by 2002. The 2 years were supposed to do all the groundwork, all the laws, all the things, 2002. At that time, the African airlines, they had 60% of their share in the aviation market in Africa. What happened? No implementation. Today, collectively, the African airlines only have 20% of the aviation market in Africa. They've lost 40% to outside airlines. And if we don't implement, in 20 years, there'll be no airlines, African airlines. They'll all be gone. Our biggest airline is Ethiopian Airline. And then the others, Kenya, South Africa, Egypt, and so on, they will all disappear unless we implement what we agreed on. There was a study done by IATA to say even if 12 countries just implemented that, they can generate 150,000 jobs amongst them. They can generate more than $1.5 billion in revenue every year. Besides that, the airlines will also grow. But we've lost. And we have 20% of the market, and it's declining. Maybe as I speak to you, because I looked at those figures early last year, maybe it's even less now. So if we don't implement, it's not just that we are not implementing, but we are actually losing. So it's up to these clubs, AU clubs, amongst the youth. And they can be intergenerational. They don't have to be just young people. They can be intergenerational. But they must follow and agitate and advocate and ask governments, why are you not implementing? We have Agenda 2063 now. All agreed. Is it going to be implemented? We hope so. But who is going to make sure that it is implemented? Of course, we are very happy that already 12 countries have asked us to help in domesticating it so that it becomes part of the DNA policies of the government. And that will guarantee implementation. We hope the others that have not yet will also do so. Other regs are also putting it in their own plans, some regs. So we are happy with that, but we need these clubs. And of course, as part of these clubs, you'll be able to send representatives to summits, we will be getting AU clubs, not PYA, unless PYA gets its act together and on this matter and get clubs that are following, working with the commission, working with everybody to follow. Because these things have happened because nobody was following. Nobody was checking what decisions have been taken and whether they've been implemented. Of course, Parliament, Pan-African Parliament is also supposed to do that. So I just want to say, from the oldest of us to the youngest, we are all future generations. And living tomorrow means that we have to make sure that the future will turn out better than today. Sometimes it looks like there is a gap between generations, and sometimes it seems much larger because you guys call yourselves tweeps or something. And the older generation don't even know what tweeps are. So, but it's not as big as you think. Because together we can do a lot more in solidarity. The older generation can bring the experience. You bring the vitality and creativity and innovation, and together we can make a great continent. We must therefore defend spaces and programs that facilitate for cooperation amongst generations, underscoring sacrifices that all present generations must make for the next generation. We are here because previous generations made sacrifices for our generation. So I believe that the youth of today are confronted with challenges which are not so dissimilar from the ones that were faced by our forebearers. So as I conclude, I want to go back where I started and quote Kwame Nkrumah as he embodies Pan-Africanism. At the inaugural meeting of the OAU, where he said, I quote, "Nothing will be of avail except the united act of a united Africa. We have already reached the stage where we must unite or sink." This must inform all of us so that these xenophobic attacks, which are deplorable, that took place in this country, must never happen. We must understand that we are one people, one destiny. And it is our working together that will take us forward. Working separately and killing each other will only take us backwards. So, again, like Puti, I'm very happy that the government realized that and swiftly acted. And I hope that it will not happen. So I wish you a very fruitful dialogue. I took a bit long time because I'm not going to be with you in many of your sessions. But I hope that the Festival of Ideas in the next 2 days will flourish. And I look forward to your conclusions. I thank you.